The following module is one part in a series developed by the Quality Improvement Core for the National Maternal and Child Health Workforce Development Center. This module will introduce the concept of prioritization, including 2 prioritization tools. By the end of this module, learners will be able to define prioritization, including why and when to use it, define and discuss 2 tools of prioritization, Impact Matrix and Prioritization Matrix, define key components of each of these tools, and finally, share tips and examples of when and how to utilize each of these prioritization tools. Once your team has established the aim of your project and determined how you will measure improvements, the next step is to identify specific changes you want to make and prioritize which ideas to focus on first. While assessing the current process, your team may identify a long list of change ideas. When you have an abundance of ideas, how do you decide which one to test first? Prioritization is an important step in the improvement process, as it allows your team to see all of the change ideas listed in one place, decide upon common criteria on which to base their decisions of which ideas to prioritize first, and which ideas may be too difficult or cumbersome to implement at the time. Prioritization tools can also create a helpful visual when explaining these decisions to senior leaders, stakeholders, additional staff, etc. Basically, prioritization tools give a quick and simple visual representation of your team's prioritization process, so there is no question as to which ideas you should test first. The first tool we will discuss in this session is the Impact Matrix. It is used to rate change ideas based on 2 criteria: impact on the project aim and difficulty to test and implement. The Impact Matrix is a great tool for both prioritizing change ideas as well as letting go of ideas that may not be the best fit at that time. First, number your change ideas so you can easily add them to the matrix without rewriting every idea. Then discuss and list these change ideas so that everyone involved has heard and seen them listed. Second, read through each idea and decide as a team both how impactful the idea will be as well as how difficult. The vertical side of the matrix measures impact. Think of this on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest amount of impact and 5 being the highest amount of impact. The greater the impact your team feels the idea will have, the higher the change will go in the matrix. The lower the impact, the lower the change will go. The horizontal side of the matrix measures difficulty. Again, think of this on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest amount of difficulty and 5 being the highest amount of difficulty. The more difficult your team feels the idea will be to implement, the farther to the right that change idea will go. The easier the idea, the farther to the left it will go. Again, this exercise is best suited for times when a team can be in a room together, and this can discuss the impact and difficulty of ideas aloud. Once the team has rated the change on the 2 criteria, plot the change in the corresponding quadrant of the impact matrix. The top left quadrant is categorized as the quick wins, as these change ideas have the most impact as well as the least path of difficulty or resistance. We start with these ideas as they can usually be implemented fairly quickly and can therefore gain buy-in for the project. The top right quadrant is categorized as the major projects, as these change ideas will have high impact but may be somewhat difficult to implement. These ideas will take a bit longer to put into action, but will be worth the effort. Change ideas in this section usually require input from senior leadership, so be sure to either have them join in on the session or present these major projects to them at a later time. The bottom left quadrant is categorized as fill-ins, as they are ideas that are fairly easy to implement but will have low impact. These change ideas can be done once your team has completed some of the quick wins and are working on some of the major projects. The bottom right quadrant is categorized as hard slogs, as they are ideas that are both difficult to implement and will have little overall impact. We encourage teams to let go of any change ideas that may fall into this category, as they will essentially take more time than they are worth. Please note, this can be a really tedious process, but it is important that all team members participate to encourage buy-in. If you feel the momentum or energy of the team decreases during this activity, take a quick break and then come back and continue. Here is a straightforward set of directions for using an impact matrix to prioritize ideas. Remember, this tool helps identify changes that will have the most impact and the least path of resistance, or the biggest bang for your buck. Be sure to number your change ideas to make reading them on the matrix a bit easier. I will show an example of this in a few slides. Make sure you are discussing these ideas as a team and that you base your decisions solely on the impact and difficulty of the change. As you talk through where these ideas should go, remember to graph them on the matrix. And lastly, remember to first focus your energy on the ideas that fall in the top left quadrant, also known as the quick wins. Here's an example from an agency who processed adoption packets and were looking to improve efficiency. Note that the ideas are clearly listed and numbered for clarity. The change ideas are then discussed among team members and added to the matrix based on impact and difficulty to implement. If you are working with a large impact matrix, for example, using flip chart paper and sticky notes, you may choose to post the actual change ideas onto the matrix. However, if you are working with a smaller version of the impact matrix and have less space, or do not prefer to rewrite ideas, you may simply add the numbers to the matrix and use the numbered list to correspond each number with its change idea. This tool works best when the entire team can be together in one room to view a version of the matrix and discuss these ideas as a team. We usually recommend using flip chart paper and post-it notes for this exercise, as mentioned earlier, or you may also utilize the smaller version of the tool located on the online step-by-step guide. Sometimes you may need more criteria by which to prioritize change ideas. A prioritization matrix allows your team to rate each idea based on several criteria and then simply start with the ideas that have the highest ratings. The prioritization matrix is more detailed and is a great tool to use if a team is remote or prioritizing ideas at different times. The prioritization matrix is a great tool for narrowing your change ideas and scoping down focus areas or projects. The multiple criteria allow your team to select ideas that will have the highest impact on your organization, clients, and community. First, select criteria. Example criteria include strategic connection to agency goals, customers indicate need for improvement, data demonstrates that a gap exists, etc. You will find many other ideas for criteria on the prioritization matrix located within the step-by-step guide on our website. Be sure when selecting criteria that the scale is specified, keeping in mind that the ideas with the highest rating will be tested first. Second, list all of your change ideas on the left-hand side of the matrix. Third, each person reviews the ideas and assigns a value based on each selection. Fourth, total the score for each idea and sort the total scores from highest to lowest. Last, review ideas that scored the highest and determine your top ideas. Again, this process can be much lengthier than the impact matrix, but can be incredibly helpful when dealing with a remote team who cannot discuss the ideas together at once. Here is a simulated example of a prioritization matrix used on a project improving care coordination for children and youth with special health care needs. The team identified several issues they could address and listed them on the left-hand side of the matrix. Each idea was then rated based on the criteria listed at the top of the matrix on a scale from 1 to 5, and the total for each idea was tallied and listed on the right-hand side. The team then began to test the changes related to the issues that ranked highest in the list. Keep in mind that the impact and prioritization matrices are tools to help your team think through and prioritize an abundance of ideas. Just because a change ranks highest doesn't mean you always have to start with that specific idea, especially if there are concerns for not testing it. During this module, we have discussed how to use the prioritization matrix to prioritize change ideas. Keep in mind that this tool can also be very useful in selecting projects and project teams. Now let's try it. Think about any change ideas your team has brainstormed thus far. Which prioritization tool will work best for your team? When selecting a prioritization tool, remember, the impact matrix is fairly straightforward in ranking ideas based on how much of an impact the idea will have and how difficult it will be to implement. The prioritization matrix allows your team to take a more detailed look at these ideas and rate them based on multiple criteria. I encourage you to use the provided link to check out the Quality Improvement Step-by-Step Guide for links to the prioritization tools discussed today. Thanks for listening and happy prioritizing!